Summer came slow and honey gold across the prairie, and Clara learned the language of quiet things. The way the cottonwoods whispered before dusk, how the horses drowsed with their heads together, the smell of sun-baked earth that rose like memory after the rain. Every morning she carried water from the well, her limp steady, her breath sure. Cole no longer hovered nearby. He learned she didn't need watching, only space. Some evenings he'd bring his chair to the porch while she mended shirts or hummed an old tune. The notes drifted into the violet air, curling around the porch posts like smoke. Sometimes he'd hum too, rough and low, until they both fell silent. It wasn't comfort they sought, but recognition. Two worn hearts, keeping time. Yet even peace has its tremors. One hot afternoon, she rode Juniper down to the creek. The mirror of the water held her face, older, leaner, alive. She bent to wash her hands, and for a moment she thought she saw her past ripple back at her. The faces of those who'd left her, the echo of her own name shouted in cruelty. It was strange how memory could haunt without warning. When she returned, Cole was in the barn. The smell of horses and hay wrapped around him, his shirt dark with sweat. He was fixing a gate hinge, muttering about rust. She stood in the doorway. "Cole," she said softly till he looked up, "I'm thinking about singing again. Not for a crowd, just to remember who I was." His hammer stilled, then a slow nod. "You don't owe the world your silence." That night she sang by the fire. Her voice cracked at first, thin as the flame's edge, then grew, round and clear, a sound both broken and whole. The song told of leaving and returning, of a long crawl back to light. When she finished, the night was so still it felt sacred. Cole's eyes glimmered in the firelight. "That was the sound of a woman standing again," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, to tell him he'd given her back more than safety. But words felt too heavy, and so she just reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. He didn't pull away. Weeks passed, and the town began to change its story. The widow who once called her trouble now asked for her songs on market days. Children waved when she rode through. Clara realized that the same voices that once branded her could also carry her name like a blessing. The scars on her leg would never fade, but they had softened into something she no longer hid. One evening, near harvest, the horizon burned with sunset. Cole had gone to mend a fence at the far pasture. When he didn't return by dark, unease twisted her chest. The wind had shifted, the sky bruised with clouds. She saddled Juniper and rode out. The storm had broken open above them, sky flashing white and purple as rain slanted through the air like thrown nails. Clara slid from Juniper's back before the mare had even stopped moving. The mud sucked at her boots as she stumbled toward him. "Cole." He turned his head, eyes clouded but calm, as if he were half dreaming. The beam lay across his leg, heavy and splintered, the kind of weight that steals the breath even from strong men. "Was fixing the post," he said, voice thin. "Wind came faster than I reckoned." She dropped to her knees beside him, hands trembling as she pressed against the wood. The rain had already soaked her dress through. Her hair clung to her face like black ribbons. "Don't move," she said, though he already couldn't. She looked around. The land stretched wide and merciless. No one in sight. That it took everything she had. Every scrap of muscle, every ounce of the fire that had once kept her crawling through the dirt. She wedged her shoulder under the beam, pushed, cried out. Her leg screamed in protest. He tried to stop her, but she shook her head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you," she hissed through her teeth. "Not like they left me." The beam shifted, just enough. He pulled himself free, groaning. They fell into the mud together, panting, the rain washing over them like baptism. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm was all around, roaring, alive, wild as the life still burning inside them. When they finally made it back to the house, the lantern light looked like heaven. She wrapped his leg tight, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. He winced once, then caught her hand. "You shouldn't be done that alone." She looked at him, hair dripping, eyes fierce. "I've been alone most of my life. I know how to fight for what's worth keeping." Something in his face broke open then, not pain, but the kind of surrender that comes from finally being seen. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You sound like her," he murmured. "Your wife?" He nodded. She used to say the same damn thing. For a heartbeat, grief and gratitude twined in the air between them, soft as breath. Clara leaned closer, not for comfort, but understanding. Their foreheads touched, two survivors, rain-soaked and shaking, finding steadiness in each other's quiet. The storm passed by dawn. The world outside was silver and new, every blade of grass jeweled with light. Cole slept, his breathing slow. Clara stood by the window, watching the mist lift off the hills. Her reflection looked back at her, older now, stronger. Whole. When he woke, she was at the stove, humming again. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough. She turned, smiling. "You missed breakfast, cowboy." He chuckled, rubbing his leg. "Reckon I owe you more than eggs." "Reckon you do," she said, and poured him coffee. They sat at the table, the morning light soft between them. Outside, the horses whinnied. The wind smelled of clean earth. The world had survived another storm, and so had they. In town, they said the reclusive rancher wasn't lonely anymore. They said the woman he found crawling through the dirt had saved his life in the rain. Folks love a story with symmetry. They never knew how much quieter, truer it was than that. Sometimes on summer nights, travelers passing by would hear music drift from the porch, a woman's voice low and clear, carrying through the dark. If they listened close, they might catch the rhythm of boots tapping gently beside her, a man humming off key, and the sound of two lives braided together in the hush between notes. And if you stood there long enough, you might understand what the prairie had taught them both. That love is not rescue. It is recognition. That grace comes not from being spared the fall, but from finding someone who chooses to sit beside you in the dirt until you're ready to stand. The wind was the first thing she remembered, the way it sighed through the brittle grass like it pitied her. The prairie stretched on forever, a golden sea under a sky too wide for mercy. Somewhere far behind her, hooves had thundered and laughter had echoed, cruel and sharp, until it faded into the distance. Now there was only silence, save for the dry rasp of her breath and the scrape of her hands against the earth as she crawled. They'd called her lame, said she wasn't worth the water it took to keep her alive. The bullet had grazed her leg in the raid, and though the wound had crusted and darkened, it was the shame that stung deeper. The moment their backs turned, leaving her in the dust, she'd watched their silhouettes shrink against the sunset until they were nothing. And then there was only her and the wind and the ache of wanting to live anyway. The sun had started to fall, red as a wound. The light made the land look like it was bleeding, every ridge and stone painted in sorrow. She moved one arm, then the other, dragging herself through the dirt, her dress torn and stiff with blood and grit. Each pull was a prayer she didn't quite believe in. Somewhere ahead, a shadow stirred. A horse, black as storm water, its mane moving like smoke in the wind. She froze, the world spinning. The rider dismounted with the slow caution of someone used to ghosts. His boots crunched through the grass, spurs quiet as whispers. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough as weathered wood. She blinked up at him, barely seeing, just shapes and light. He knelt beside her, and she smelled tobacco and leather and something older, loneliness maybe. He was not a young man. His eyes had the kind of stillness that comes from burying too many dreams. "Name's Cole McAllister," he said. "You're on my land." Her lips cracked when she tried to answer. Only a sound came out, a scrape, not a word. He hesitated, then lifted her with surprising gentleness. Her head fell against his chest, hearing the slow, steady thud of his heart. She thought she'd never hear another heartbeat up close again. The world blurred into color and sound. She caught glimpses, a weathered porch, the shadow of a barn, the smell of hay and horses. Then darkness folded over her like a blanket. When she woke, the room was dim, walls of rough pine glowing with lamplight. The bed beneath her felt impossibly soft. Her leg was bound tight, the ache deep but clean, as though the pain had been tamed for now. A kettle hissed somewhere, and she heard the slow shuffle of boots. Cole stood by the window, looking out at the horizon. His silhouette was cut sharp against the pale dawn. "Thought you might not wake," he said without turning. Her throat burned. "I didn't plan to." That made him glance over his shoulder. His eyes were the color of river stone, dull until light found them. Well, plans change. Days passed in the hush of prairie mornings. The house was large but empty, a kind of echo trapped inside its walls. He kept to himself mostly, tending to chores with quiet precision. She learned his rhythm, the clink of tools, the soft murmur he gave the horses, the whistle that meant he was thinking. Her name was Clara May, though she told him only after a week. The name felt like a ghost in her mouth, belonging to someone she used to be, someone who could run and laugh and trust. She'd been part of a traveling troupe once, singing in saloons, until a scoundrel promised love and left her with nothing but debts and bruises. Then came the outlaws who'd called her lame. They'd used her voice until it no longer earned them coin. When she'd faltered, they'd abandoned her. Cole didn't ask much, but he listened in the quiet way some men do, with his hands still and his eyes steady. When she spoke of pain, he didn't flinch. When she fell silent, he didn't fill the space. The townsfolk, though, had their own whispers. Word spread that Cole had taken in a stranger, a wounded woman from the trail. The widow at the mercantile called her trouble. The ranch hands in town said she'd be gone soon. Like all the others who passed through his gates, Clara heard the talk. It reached her through the wind, through the way people averted their gaze when she limped into town beside him. She carried it like a brand. Lame, left behind, pitted, but on the ranch, life unfolded in slow, steady rhythms. Cole built her a crutch from hickory, carved smooth by hand. When he gave it to her, he didn't speak, just held it out, his face unreadable. She ran her fingers over the wood and whispered, "Thank you." He tipped his hat. "Figure you might want to stand again." That night, she sat by the fire and watched him in saddle. The flames painted his face in gold and shadow. She realized she didn't even know what had broken him, why a man with money and land would live alone in silence. So she asked. He looked into the fire for a long time before answering. "Had a wife once. Long time ago. She got sick in winter. I kept thinking I could save her if I just worked harder, fix things faster." His voice softened. "Turns out some things ain't meant to be fixed." The wind rattled the window pane. Clara felt the ache of his words deep inside her chest, the kind of ache that recognized its own reflection. From then on, the silence between them changed. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was understanding. As spring brushed the hills green, Clara's strength returned. She began helping with the horses, her limp steady but sure. The mare named Juniper took to her, nuzzling her hand whenever she approached. Cole watched from a distance, arms crossed, pretending not to care. But she saw the flicker of something soft in his eyes, pride, maybe, or quiet relief. One evening, after a long day mending fences, he found her standing by the corral, staring at the horizon. The sunset turned everything to molten amber. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked, leaning on the rail. She smiled faintly. "All the time. Then I remember there's nowhere I'd rather be crawling back to." He chuckled, low and rare. "Reckon that's fair." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the air between them felt alive. No words, no promises, just the sound of the wind and the slow drift of dusk. But peace in the Wild West never stayed long. One morning, a group of riders came, a dust storm of old ghosts. The same men who'd left her behind. Their leader, a man named Royce Danner, swung down from his horse with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, look what the coyotes didn't finish," he sneered. "You sure do land on your feet, Clara May." Cole stepped between them, calm but solid as a mountain. "You got business here?" Royce spat. "That woman's ours. She ran with our outfit. Owes us what she took." "I don't owe you a damn thing," Clara said, voice shaking but clear. The silence that followed felt like the land itself was holding its breath. Royce reached for his gun, but Cole was faster, not in violence, but in stillness. His hand rested easy on his holster, eyes cold as rain. "You best ride out, boy. There's graves enough in this dirt already." Something in his voice, low, carved from loss, made even Royce hesitate. After a tense moment, the outlaws turned and rode off, their dust hanging in the air like ghosts. When they were gone, Clara's knees buckled. Cole caught her before she fell. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. "Then stop," he said. "Ain't nobody gonna take you from here." That night, the storm came. Real this time. Lightning cracking open the sky, rain drumming against the roof. Clara stood at the window, watching the land shimmer silver and wild. Cole joined her, his hand brushing hers on the sill. "I used to hate the rain," she murmured. "It always meant trouble on the road. And now it sounds like forgiveness." He looked at her then, not like a savior, not like a man rescuing something broken, but like someone finally seeing what was whole.